Have you ever felt like the world was against you? Like everything you worked for was slipping through your fingers, no matter how hard you tried? That's exactly how I felt the day I found out my grandfather had left me everything. His company, his legacy, everything, while my mother and stepfather were left with nothing. It was a moment that would change my life forever. And there's teaser. But it wasn't just about the company. No, it was more than that. It was about proving myself, about showing the world that I could handle the responsibility that had been thrust upon me. Little did I know, this inheritance was just the beginning of a battle for control. A battle that would test my strength, my resolve, and ultimately my very identity. Story. I still remember the moment the will was read. The room was heavy with silence, every person's gaze fixed on me as the lawyer announced, "Mia Whitmore is the sole heir to Whitmore Industries." It wasn't a mistake. No one in that room could believe it. Not my mother. Not Richard, her new husband, who had been eyeing the company as if it were already his. And certainly not the board members, who had all but expected the company to go to my mother. But I owned it. Every last share, every asset, every piece of my grandfather's empire. It was hard to take in at first. I had barely come to terms with losing him. And now, in the blink of an eye, I was supposed to lead a company worth billions. I was 25, young, inexperienced, and suddenly thrust into a role I had never imagined for myself. But there was one thing I was sure of. My grandfather believed in me. And his belief, his unwavering faith in my abilities, was the only thing that kept me grounded in that moment. You see, my grandfather wasn't just a businessman. He was a mentor, a teacher, and a father figure to me. While my mother and I had always been at odds, he was the one who truly understood me. As I sat by his bedside in his final days, I remember his weak voice, barely above a whisper. "Mia, you're the only one I trust. Don't let them take what I built." His words echoed in my mind as I sat in that cold, sterile room surrounded by family who expected me to step aside. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, their disbelief that I, of all people, would inherit everything. But I wasn't going to let them take it. Not without a fight. The battle was just beginning, and I had no idea what I was in for. Would I be able to hold on to the company? Could I prove to the world that I was capable of leading it, despite my age, despite my doubts? Or would my mother and Richard, with all their manipulative tactics, succeed in taking it all from me? I didn't know then, but I was about to find out. This was my story of inheritance, betrayal, and finding the courage to lead when no one thought I could. Jessica had always lived in the shadows of her family's expectations, especially when it came to her mother. Growing up, she was told time and time again that she was never good enough, never as capable as her mother wanted her to be. Her mother, a woman of power and ambition, always envisioned taking over her father's legacy. But Jessica, well, she always felt more like an afterthought. She had worked in various roles within the family business, but never at the forefront. She wasn't the one expected to take the reins. And why would she be? She was the quiet one, the one who never quite fit the mold her mother had set for her. For years, Jessica had accepted that she would never be the one to inherit it all. It wasn't something she was bitter about, but it certainly wasn't something she ever expected. The thought that one day she might lead the company, her grandfather's legacy, was as distant as a dream. Her mother had always been at the center of that world. Jessica had assumed her mother would be the one to take over, just as she had always assumed she would inherit everything. But life, as it often does, threw a curveball. When Jessica's grandfather passed away, she had barely come to terms with his death before the will was read. And that's when the unexpected happened. The lawyer's voice rang clear in the quiet room, and the world as Jessica knew it came crashing down. "Mia Whitmore is the sole heir to Whitmore Industries," the lawyer announced. The room fell silent. Jessica blinked in disbelief. Her mother's face went pale, her grip tightening on the arm of Richard, her new husband. She had expected the company to be left to her, not to her daughter, not to Jessica. Jessica could barely process it all. She hadn't even had a chance to grieve her grandfather properly when the news hit. In her mind, She had always been the last person in the room to inherit such a monumental legacy. And yet there it was. The company, her grandfather's empire, was hers. Her mother, of course, was furious. She stood up immediately, her voice cold and controlled, trying to regain the upper hand. "This isn't right," she spat. "He must have made a mistake. Should have been me. I'm his daughter." It wasn't just the shock of the inheritance. It was the deep, unspoken pain that came with her mother's reaction. Jessica had spent most of her life feeling invisible to her mother, and now, even in her grief, her mother couldn't hide her resentment. It was clear. Jessica wasn't just a disappointment in her mother's eyes. She was now a threat to everything her mother had always wanted. Jessica, on the other hand, felt a mix of disbelief and overwhelming responsibility. She had no idea how to take over a multi-million-dollar company, let alone a legacy so deeply entwined with her family's history. But there was one thing she did know. Her grandfather had believed in her. He had always seen something in her that no one else did. That's why, even though she didn't feel ready, she knew she had to step up. Life is full of unexpected turns. Sometimes the things we never expect, the things we never even dream of, are the very things that end up shaping our lives. Jessica's inheritance wasn't just about money or power. It was a test, a challenge she had never seen coming. And as she would soon learn, sometimes the things that seem like a burden can actually be an opportunity to prove what you're truly made of. Now, let's see what happens next, as Jessica faces the consequences of her inheritance and the challenges ahead. After the will was read, Jessica thought that the storm had passed. She thought that now, with the weight of the company on her shoulders, her life would settle into some kind of normalcy. But what she didn't realize was that her real battle was just beginning. It wasn't going to be about managing the company. It was going to be about managing her family, especially her mother and Richard. Behind closed doors, her mother and Richard were already scheming. They couldn't believe that everything her grandfather had built was now in Jessica's hands. To them, it felt like an injustice. After all, her mother had spent years working her way into the position she thought she deserved. And Richard, her new husband, had always dreamed of taking control of the business himself. To him, Jessica's inheritance was nothing more than a roadblock in his path to power. One evening, Jessica overheard a conversation between her mother and Richard that would change everything. She had been walking past the study, but she stopped when she heard her mother's voice rising in frustration. "He can't just leave it all to her," her mother hissed. "She's too young, too inexperienced. What does she know about running a billion-dollar company?" Richard's voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "I know, but we can work this out. We'll make her see that she can't handle this on her own. We can help her, show her that it's just too much for her to handle. She'll never be able to make the tough decisions. All we have to do is convince her." Jessica's heart sank. She knew that her mother had always believed she was entitled to the business, but hearing it like this, hearing how Richard planned to manipulate her, made her stomach churn. She couldn't believe that her own family was willing to go to such lengths to take what wasn't theirs. The plan was simple. Jessica would be convinced that she wasn't ready to lead. Her mother would appeal to her emotions, using guilt to make her feel like she was making the wrong choice by holding on to the company. Richard would back her up, using his experience to show Jessica that she was in over her head. And together, they would make Jessica feel like stepping aside was the only sensible thing to do. The next day, her mother made her move. "Mia, sweetie," her mother began, her tone dripping with concern as she approached Jessica in the living room. "I know this is overwhelming for you. You're so young, and there's so much responsibility that comes with running a business like this. You've always been such a good girl, but this is a man's world, darling. The pressure is intense. You don't have to do this. Richard and I, we can help you. We have the experience you need." Jessica felt the tug of guilt. She loved her mother, despite their complicated relationship. And part of her wondered if maybe her mother was right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Maybe it was too much for someone her age. But then her mother's next words cut through her like a knife. Think about the toll this will take on your life, Mia. The company will consume you. You'll never be able to have a family, a life of your own. Richard and I could take care of everything. You wouldn't have to worry. You could just enjoy your life, free from all of this pressure. Jessica's heart ached. Her mother was playing on her deepest insecurities, the fear that she wasn't capable, the fear that she would fail. Her mother was using those emotions to manipulate her into believing that giving up was the only option. But Jessica wasn't as naive as her mother thought. She had learned a lot in her life, and though it stung, she knew what was happening. This wasn't about her mother wanting what was best for her. It was about control. It always had been. There are people who will manipulate emotions and use guilt to achieve their own agendas, especially within families. The desire for power can cloud judgment and lead people to use tactics that exploit weaknesses. It's important to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate you and learn to stand firm in your convictions. Family ties shouldn't be used as a weapon to undermine someone's potential, but rather as a source of support and encouragement. Jessica's challenge wasn't just about the company. It was about standing up to the people who had always underestimated her. But Jessica wouldn't back down. She wasn't going to let them win without a fight. Little did they know, she was about to turn the tables. The weight of her inheritance was heavier than Jessica had anticipated. Every day, the reality of managing her grandfather's empire seemed more daunting. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, whispering to her that she wasn't ready, that she wasn't capable. The expectations felt suffocating. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her mind. "You're too young. You don't have what it takes." But Jessica knew she couldn't let those words control her. She had worked hard for this. She had spent years shadowing her grandfather, learning the ropes of the family business, even if her mother hadn't noticed. The company wasn't just a set of numbers and transactions. It was a legacy, a symbol of everything her grandfather had built with his own hands. He had trusted her. And somehow, in the midst of the chaos, she could feel his presence, his guidance. Late one night, as Jessica sat at her desk in the quiet of the house, she found herself lost in thought. The shadows of doubt still lingered, but she couldn't escape the memories of the conversations she had shared with her grandfather. "Mia," he would say in his raspy voice, "business isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about listening, learning, and making decisions that matter. Don't rush, and don't let anyone tell you that you're not capable. Trust yourself. I trust you." Those words echoed in her mind like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of uncertainty. She could hear his wisdom, the belief he had in her. For all the years of being dismissed by her mother, her grandfather had always believed in her potential. He had seen something in her that no one else had. He had always trusted her instincts, and now it was her turn to trust herself. Jessica stood up from her desk, pacing around the room as she recalled more of their conversations. "You're capable of so much more than you think," he had told her. "Leadership doesn't come from titles, Mia. It comes from understanding people, from knowing when to take risks and when to hold back." For the first time in days, she felt a spark of clarity. Her grandfather's wisdom was the foundation she needed. The company was hers to lead, and she couldn't let her fear or her mother's doubts stop her. But the path wouldn't be easy. She knew that. The board members were skeptical, and her mother and Richard were already plotting behind the scenes. But Jessica wasn't going to let that stop her. She would learn, grow, and fight for what she had inherited. Not just the company, but the legacy of a man who had always believed in her. She sat down at her desk, pulling out the documents she had been avoiding. Plans, proposals, and meetings. She started reviewing them with a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about proving her mother wrong, though that would be sweet. It was about honoring her grandfather's legacy, about showing herself, and everyone else, that she was capable of leading, even if the odds were stacked against her. Self-doubt is a natural part of facing any new challenge, but it's how you handle it that matters. Jessica's journey teaches us that believing in ourselves is often the first and most important step. When you face challenges, look for the voices of support and encouragement in your life, especially from those who have seen you grow and succeed. Trust their belief in you, even when you can't fully see it in yourself. And remember, leadership isn't about age or experience. It's about confidence, perseverance, and the courage to take that first step. As Jessica began preparing to face the board and her family, she knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't backing down. Not anymore. The honeymoon period of Jessica's new role as CEO didn't last long. Barely a week into her leadership, the media circus began. Headlines across the country were quick to pick up on the story of a 25-year-old woman suddenly taking over a billion-dollar company. The press, as it always does, fed on sensationalism and controversy. They didn't see Jessica as a promising leader. They saw her as an inexperienced young woman in over her head. The first headline Jessica saw was in Business Weekly. Whitmore Empire falls into inexperienced hands. Can a 25-year-old really lead? Felt like a punch to the gut. The article was filled with doubts, pointing out her age, her lack of experience, and questioning her ability to carry on her grandfather's legacy. It wasn't just the media. It was the investors, the board members. Everyone seemed to be questioning her ability to lead. They didn't take her seriously. But Jessica quickly realized that this wasn't just bad press. It was part of something bigger. The seeds of sabotage had been planted, and her mother and Richard were behind it. Richard, using his connections and his insider knowledge, had reached out to reporters and investors, feeding them negative stories about Jessica's leadership. He had been whispering behind the scenes, making sure that every article, every report, reinforced the idea that Jessica wasn't up to the job. It wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a full-on assault. This wasn't the first time a young CEO had faced such challenges. History is filled with stories of young leaders who've had to fight their way to the top, constantly under the microscope. Take Mark Zuckerberg, for example. In the early days of Facebook, the media questioned his age and experience, calling him a boy wonder with no real business acumen. Even Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, faced media and investor scrutiny as his company grew rapidly, with many questioning his leadership style and decisions. But just like those leaders, Jessica wasn't going to let the pressure break her. Every time Jessica turned on the television or opened her phone, there was another article, another critic questioning her abilities. A CEO too young for the job, one headline read. Is Whitmore Industries headed for a collapse? Another speculated. It was exhausting. And the worst part was knowing that her mother and Richard were behind it. They had expected her to fold under the pressure, to step down gracefully. But Jessica wasn't about to let them win. She remembered her grandfather's words. Don't let them take what I built. So she did what any leader would do, she faced it head-on. She took a deep breath, stepped in front of the cameras, and gave an interview to clear her name. She didn't back down. She didn't apologize for her age. Instead, she talked about her vision for the company, about the work she had already put in, and about the legacy her grandfather had entrusted to her. Still, the pressure continued. The board, once her grandfather's loyal team, started to waver. Some members, feeling the heat from investors and the media, began questioning Jessica's decisions in meetings. They were no longer looking at her as the rightful CEO. They were looking at her as a liability. They didn't believe in her, and it felt like the walls were closing in. Jessica's story teaches us the harsh reality of leadership, especially for young leaders. When you're thrust into the spotlight, you're not just managing your company. You're managing perceptions, expectations, and the pressure of public opinion. The media and external forces can often paint a picture that isn't aligned with your reality. But what matters is how you respond. Leadership isn't just about making the right decisions. It's about standing firm in the face of adversity. Jessica's challenge was not just about running a business. It was about managing the pressure of external forces and proving time and time again that she was capable of leading. The media firestorm was only just beginning. But Jessica wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Jessica had always imagined her first boardroom meeting would be a celebration, a moment of triumph where she would step in and take charge. But the reality was far from her expectations. The room was cold, filled with skeptical faces, faces that had once looked to her grandfather for leadership, not her. As she walked into the grand boardroom, the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressed heavily on her shoulders, and the tension was palpable. Every chair was occupied by an experienced member of the board, some of whom had been with the company longer than she had been alive. "Good morning, everyone," Jessica said, trying to sound confident, though the nerves bubbled just beneath the surface. The room remained silent as she took her seat at the head of the long table. The air was thick with uncertainty. It wasn't just Jessica's age that was under scrutiny, it was her very right to sit at that table. She was there because of her grandfather's will, not because of her years of experience. She could feel their eyes on her, measuring her, questioning if she was capable. Mr. Holloway, a senior board member and one of her grandfather's oldest allies, was the first to speak. His voice was calm but firm, laced with an underlying edge of skepticism. "Mia," he began, using the name from her grandfather's will, "your grandfather was a visionary, but this is a big decision. We're all aware that you're still learning the ropes. No one here doubts your potential, but the reality is, you lack experience in leading a company of this scale." Jessica swallowed hard, feeling the sting of his words. She had anticipated some resistance, but hearing it so openly, in front of the entire board, stung. They were questioning not just her abilities, but the very decision her grandfather had made. It felt like a direct attack on her legitimacy as the company's CEO. Mr. Langston, another board member, chimed in. "We've all had years of experience here. You can't just step in and run a business of this magnitude. Your grandfather may have believed in you, but does that mean you're prepared to make the tough decisions?" Jessica's heart raced. She had spent years working under her grandfather, learning the ins and outs of the company. But she had never been in charge. She knew that, and now she had to prove to them, and to herself, that she could handle it. The eyes of the room were fixed on her, waiting for her response. She could feel the pressure building, like the walls of the room were closing in around her. Taking a deep breath, Jessica spoke, her voice steady but firm. "I know I don't have the years of experience that all of you have," she said, meeting each board member's gaze. "But that doesn't mean I don't understand this company. I've been learning from the best, my grandfather. And while I may be new to this role, I've spent my whole life preparing for it. The company isn't just about experience. It's about vision. It's about moving forward, even when the path isn't clear." The room was silent again, but this time there was a shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Jessica could sense it. She had made her point. The decision her grandfather had made was not based on her age or experience. It was based on trust. And it was her responsibility to earn that trust, not just from the board, but from herself. Mr. Holloway leaned back in his chair, his expression softening slightly. "Vision is important, Mia. But vision alone won't keep this company running. You'll need the board's support, and you'll need to prove that you can make the tough calls." Jessica nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She didn't expect everyone to believe in her right away. But she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. "I'm here to earn your trust," she said, her voice gaining strength. "And I'm ready to face the challenges that come with leading this company. But I can't do it alone. I need all of you to help me build the future of Whitmore Industries. Together." The lesson Jessica learned in this first boardroom confrontation was one of patience and the importance of communication. In high-pressure environments, especially when you're new to leadership, you need to be prepared to face skepticism and doubt. It's not enough to have a vision. You must communicate it clearly and confidently. Leadership is not just about making decisions. It's about managing the expectations of others and building trust. Jessica's ability to stand her ground despite the pressure showed the board that she wasn't just a figurehead. She was ready to lead. The first battle in the boardroom was just the beginning. Jessica knew there were more challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. She had proven to herself that she had what it took. "Before we move forward with Jessica's journey, I want to hear from you. How do you feel about the situation she's in right now? Imagine being in her shoes, unexpectedly inheriting everything, while your own family tries to take it all away. What would you do? Do you think she's strong enough to take on this responsibility? Or do you think the pressure will be too much? Drop your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this. Let's dive back in and see how Jessica handles the challenge ahead. Just when Jessica felt the weight of her challenges growing unbearable, a surprising offer of support came from an unexpected ally, Lucas Sinclair. He wasn't someone Jessica had anticipated relying on, but it turned out that Lucas, her grandfather's trusted business partner, had been quietly watching her from the sidelines. Lucas was a man with experience, real experience, a seasoned financial genius. He had helped pull the company out of the red more than once, using his sharp business acumen and strategic thinking to steer Whitmore Industries through tough times. He had always been there for her grandfather, and now he was offering his support to Jessica, the very person her family and the board had doubted. It all started one evening when Jessica was in her office, overwhelmed with the media backlash and the growing pressure from the board. She had just finished another round of meetings where the investors questioned her every move. Her phone rang, and the name on the screen caught her off guard. Lucas Sinclair. Jessica. His deep, calm voice greeted her when she picked up. I know you're facing some challenges right now. I've been watching closely, and I think it's time we had a conversation. She felt a strange relief. The idea that someone, especially someone with his experience, was willing to offer guidance was something she hadn't expected. I'm all ears, she replied, her tone cautious but hopeful. In the following days, Lucas became an unexpected yet invaluable ally. They met at a sleek downtown office where Lucas had established himself as a leading financial strategist. His reputation in the industry was solid, and his connections were vast. More importantly, he had the knowledge and experience that Jessica lacked. Their first meeting was not about technicalities or corporate maneuvers. It was about understanding Jessica's vision. Lucas didn't bombard her with strategies or suggestions immediately. Instead, he listened intently as Jessica described her grandfather's legacy, her goals, and the challenges she was facing. Lucas understood the emotional weight behind her role. He knew what it meant for Jessica to prove herself not just to the board, but to her family. I'm not here to take over, Lucas said, his voice steady. I'm here to help you. You have the vision, Jessica. What you need is someone who's seen it all before, someone who knows how to navigate the storm. I can help you with that. What started as an advisory role soon became a strategic partnership. Lucas, with his deep financial knowledge, began advising Jessica on key decisions, helping her manage the pressure from investors and guiding her through complex corporate negotiations. He didn't make the decisions for her, but he gave her the tools and the confidence to make them herself. One of the most valuable things Lucas taught her was how to leverage her position. Your biggest asset right now is your grandfather's legacy. Don't shy away from it. Use it, he advised. He helped her see that, despite her perceived inexperience, the company had a deep-rooted reputation and history that she could build upon. Lucas also became her sounding board during difficult moments. When Jessica faced tough choices, whether it was managing a crisis with the board or handling negative press, Lucas was there, offering calm, level-headed advice. His support wasn't just financial or strategic. It was emotional, too. As a mentor, he reminded her that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about making decisions based on integrity and the long-term vision of the company. Lesson: Jessica's experience with Lucas shows just how important it is to build a support network in the business world. No one can succeed alone, especially when stepping into a leadership role for the first time. Strategic partners, mentors, and trusted advisors can offer invaluable guidance, whether it's in navigating a crisis or in making tough decisions. It's essential to surround yourself with people who bring knowledge, experience, and a fresh perspective. Jessica's relationship with Lucas underscores the value of mentorship and partnership in the business world. Sometimes the right ally can make all the difference when everything feels uncertain. As Jessica continued to navigate the treacherous waters of leadership, Lucas proved time and again that she didn't have to face it alone. With his support, She was more prepared than ever to confront the challenges ahead. Jessica had suspected that something wasn't right. The subtle hints, the whispers at board meetings, the way certain key investors suddenly seemed hesitant about her leadership. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was working against her. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon a trail of emails and documents that she finally uncovered the full extent of the sabotage. It started with a simple phone call from Lucas, her trusted advisor. "I've come across something you need to see," he said. His voice tinged with urgency. Lucas had connections, and he was always one step ahead, especially when it came to tracking corporate backstabbing. The documents he sent her were shocking. A series of emails between Richard and a group of competitors, discussing how to weaken Whitmore Industries from the inside. They were not only trying to undermine her leadership, but they were also feeding the media negative stories about Jessica and her ability to manage the company. Richard had been working behind her back, reaching out to rival companies, promising them insider information about Whitmore's strategy in exchange for their support in the event of a corporate coup. He had been doing this for weeks, feeding them confidential details and fueling a sense of distrust among the investors and board members. Jessica's mother, too, had been a part of the scheme. Through the emails, it became clear that she had been working in tandem with Richard, subtly planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the investors, even going so far as to criticize Jessica's decisions in private meetings with key stakeholders. They were playing a dangerous game, trying to manipulate the board and investors into believing that Jessica wasn't capable of leading the company. Jessica was horrified as she read through the documents, but at the same time, she felt a surge of determination. She wasn't going to let them take the company from her, not after everything her grandfather had built. She knew that she had to act fast. This wasn't just about protecting her position, it was about protecting the company, her family's legacy, and the employees who depended on her leadership. The sabotage was more than just a personal attack, it was an attack on the entire organization. The manipulative tactics they were using were designed to destabilize the company, weaken investor confidence, and ultimately strip her of her rightful role. But Jessica wasn't about to let that happen. With Lucas's help, she gathered all the evidence she needed: emails, recordings, and even testimonies from some of the employees who had witnessed Richard's dealings. They presented the evidence to the board in a special meeting. It was a tense moment, the room full of people who had once been loyal to her grandfather, but who were now divided. As Jessica laid out the facts, she could feel the weight of the room's judgment. But she didn't waver. This wasn't just about defending her own position, it was about standing up for what was right. Jessica's discovery of the sabotage shows how crucial it is to protect a company from both internal and external threats. In family-run businesses, emotions can cloud judgment, and hidden agendas can emerge when power and control are at stake. Jessica learned that managing risk isn't just about making smart business decisions. It's about being vigilant, gathering evidence, and acting quickly when you sense that something is off. Detecting and addressing sabotage is key to maintaining control and ensuring that the company's values and legacy are protected. In the face of betrayal, Jessica showed the importance of transparency and accountability, and how standing firm against manipulation can ultimately secure your leadership and the future of your business. Now that the truth was out in the open, Jessica knew that the hardest part was over. But she also knew that Richard and her mother wouldn't back down easily. The fight was far from over. This was just the beginning of her real test as a leader. The day of the final vote arrived, and with it, the culmination of everything Jessica had fought for. Her nerves were steady, her resolve unshakable. After everything she had uncovered, the betrayal from Richard and her mother, the sabotage, and the overwhelming pressure from the board, this was the moment that would define her future, and the future of Whitmore Industries. Jessica had spent the last few days preparing for this. She had met with Lucas and reviewed the evidence, emails, recordings, and testimonies, all the proof that Richard and her mother had been actively undermining her. She knew that the board was divided. Some members still sided with her, but others were uncertain. They needed to be convinced not just with her words, but with the undeniable truth. The boardroom was tense, filled with the powerful faces of men and women who had once worked closely with her grandfather. Some of them were loyal to Jessica, but others had been quietly swayed by Richard's promises. As the meeting began, Jessica sat at the head of the long table, the eyes of the room upon her. She had no time to waste. This wasn't just about keeping her job. It was about saving the company and ensuring that her grandfather's legacy would continue. She opened the meeting calmly, her voice clear and firm. "I stand before you today not just as the granddaughter of the founder of Whitmore Industries, but as someone who has earned the right to lead. I'm not here to fight for power. I'm here to protect the future of this company. And I won't let anyone destroy it." The room fell silent. Richard, sitting on the opposite side of the table, gave her a tight, forced smile, trying to maintain his facade of confidence. But Jessica could see the cracks. He knew what was coming. She leaned forward, pulling out a folder that contained all the evidence she had painstakingly gathered over the past few weeks. "Before we proceed with this vote, I want to make sure everyone here understands the full extent of what has been happening behind closed doors." She slid the folder across the table, and one by one, the board members began to look at the documents inside. "What you're seeing," Jessica continued, "is proof of a deliberate campaign to undermine my leadership. Richard and my mother have been in contact with our competitors, sharing confidential company information, and planting negative stories in the media to destabilize Whitmore Industries. They have actively worked against the company, and against me, for their own gain." The room erupted in murmurs, but Jessica didn't stop. She had to make them see the truth. "I'm not making these accusations lightly. I've gathered testimonies from employees, email exchanges, and recordings from meetings where these discussions took place. This is not a baseless attack. This is a betrayal of everything my grandfather worked for." Richard, his face pale with anger, tried to interrupt, but Jessica raised her hand, signaling that she wasn't finished. "I have spent my whole life preparing for this moment. I have worked tirelessly to learn the ropes of this company, and despite what some of you may think, I have the vision and determination to lead. My grandfather believed in me, and I won't let his legacy be destroyed by personal ambition." Her words resonated in the room. The board members, who had once been divided, were now listening closely. They were seeing the truth, not just about Jessica's ability, but about the betrayal she had been forced to face. It was no longer just about leadership, it was about integrity, about doing what was right for the company, not personal gain. Jessica's victory in the final showdown teaches us an invaluable lesson about perseverance, the power of truth, and the importance of standing firm when everything is on the line. She didn't win by playing dirty or fighting back with anger. She won by using the truth, by being transparent and honest, and by presenting irrefutable evidence. Leadership is not just about making decisions. It's about having the courage to confront difficult truths and the strength to stand up for what's right. In this battle for control, Jessica didn't just regain her position. She earned the respect of the board and secured her place as the rightful leader of Whitmore Industries. As the vote was called, Jessica watched as one by one, the board members raised their hands in her favor. It was unanimous. She had won. Richard, defeated and humiliated, stood up from the table, his plans shattered. Her mother, her face flushed with rage, shot Jessica a look that was both bitter and resentful, but she didn't say a word. The moment Jessica had been waiting for finally arrived. The company, her grandfather's legacy, was hers to lead. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that she was capable of leading it, no matter the obstacles. The fight wasn't over, but Jessica had won the most important battle. And now, she was ready to build the future of Whitmore Industries, her way. The dust had finally settled, and Jessica stood victorious. She had not only fought for the leadership of Whitmore Industries, but she had also earned the trust and respect of her board and employees. With Richard and her mother no longer a threat to the company, Jessica was ready to embark on the next phase of her journey, transforming Whitmore Industries into a company that aligned with her values while honoring the legacy her grandfather had built. Becoming the CEO was only the beginning. The real challenge now was proving that she wasn't just a figurehead. She was a leader. For the first time in her life, Jessica truly felt the weight of her responsibility. She knew that leading the company would require more than just making decisions from behind a desk. It would require her to connect with the people who worked there, to understand their needs, and to build a culture that would carry the company forward for generations. One of her first steps was to rebuild relationships with the employees who had been wary of her leadership. For too long, the company had been led by her grandfather, a visionary who had built it from the ground up. But now it was her turn to show that her leadership was not just a result of inheritance. It was something she had earned. She made it a priority to meet with department heads, listen to employees' concerns, and understand what was working and what wasn't. She visited the different branches of the company, not as the CEO who dictated orders, but as someone who was genuinely interested in the thoughts and ideas of her team. During these visits, Jessica often found herself reminding employees of the values her grandfather had instilled in them: honesty, integrity, and the importance of hard work. She made it clear that she wasn't just here to continue his legacy. She was here to build on it. She wanted the company to be known not just for its financial success but for its commitment to its people, its community, and its customers. Jessica also faced the difficult task of making decisions that would shape the future of the company. Some of the changes were long overdue, shifting the company's focus toward more sustainable practices, implementing new technologies, and addressing gaps in the leadership team. These were bold moves, and they weren't always popular. But Jessica knew that change was necessary. She couldn't just maintain the status quo and expect to lead the company into the future. The world was evolving, and so was Whitmore Industries. She introduced a new company-wide initiative focused on innovation and collaboration. Under Jessica's leadership, Whitmore Industries began to embrace a culture of open communication and teamwork. No longer would decisions be made in isolation by a few powerful individuals at the top. Jessica encouraged her team to share their ideas and work together to solve problems. It wasn't always easy, and there were challenges along the way. But over time, the culture of the company began to shift. People felt more engaged, more connected to the company's mission, and more invested in its success. One of the most significant challenges Jessica faced was balancing the business side of things with the people side. As the company grew, so did the pressure to meet financial targets and satisfy stakeholders. But Jessica never lost sight of the human element. She made sure that every decision she made was in the best interest of both the company's long-term health and its people. She invested in employee development, implemented wellness programs, and made sure that her leadership team was diverse and represented the values she wanted the company to embody. Jessica's victory and the legacy she built teach us that leadership isn't just about maintaining what came before. It's about growing, evolving, and creating something new that is rooted in the past but looking toward the future. Inheritance may give you the title, but it's your actions, your vision, and your commitment to your team that will define your success. Jessica understood that leadership is about more than just holding a position. It's about the responsibility to guide, nurture, and build something that lasts. Her ability to balance her grandfather's legacy with the need for innovation and change is a lesson for all leaders. True leadership requires the courage to evolve, the humility to listen, and the strength to make difficult decisions for the greater good. As Jessica looked out over the horizon, she knew this was just the beginning. The company was stronger than ever, and she was ready to lead it into the future, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of tomorrow. As Jessica stood at the helm of Whitmore Industries, looking out over the company she had fought so hard to lead, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It had been a turbulent ride, one filled with challenges and setbacks. But it was in those very moments of adversity that she had grown the most, and it was those moments that had shaped her into the leader she had become today. At the beginning, Jessica had been unsure. She had doubted herself, questioning whether she was truly capable of handling the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. When the media attacked, when Richard and her mother tried to manipulate the company, when the board members doubted her, it would have been easy to give up. The pressure was intense, and there were days when the weight of it all seemed too much to bear. But Jessica didn't give up. She didn't let the doubt, the betrayal, or the pressure define her. Instead, she leaned into her strengths, her ability to listen, to learn, and most importantly, to trust in herself. She remembered the lessons her grandfather had taught her about the importance of integrity, hard work, and resilience. And it was through that belief in herself, even when the odds seemed stacked against her, that Jessica found the strength to overcome every obstacle. Along the way, Jessica made mistakes, decisions that didn't always go as planned, moments where she felt like she was losing control. But those mistakes were not failures, they were lessons. Each one taught her something valuable about leadership, about the importance of patience, and about the power of perseverance. She learned that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about facing your fears, confronting challenges head-on, and continuing to move forward, even when the road is unclear. One of the biggest lessons Jessica learned was the power of persistence. When Richard and her mother attempted to sabotage her leadership, it would have been easy to give in to their manipulation. But Jessica refused to let them win. She faced the betrayal with grace and dignity, exposing their lies and standing firm in her conviction that she was the rightful leader of Whitmore Industries. That decision, standing up for herself, even in the face of overwhelming opposition, was the turning point in her journey. It was the moment when she truly became a leader, not just in title but in action. Jessica's story is a testament to the power of self-belief and perseverance. No matter how difficult the journey, no matter how many times you fall, the key to success lies in your ability to rise again. It's about having the courage to trust in yourself, the patience to learn from your mistakes, and the resilience to keep moving forward, even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. In the face of competition, adversity, and doubt, true leaders don't give up. They rise stronger, more determined, and more prepared to face whatever challenges come their way. Jessica proved that leadership isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about learning how to navigate it with confidence and grace. As Jessica looks ahead to the future, she knows this is just the beginning of a long journey. But now, she faces it with the unwavering belief that she is capable of leading Whitmore Industries to even greater heights. And with that belief, there's nothing she can't accomplish. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey with Jessica. Her story is a powerful reminder that no matter how daunting the challenges may seem, the strength to overcome them lies within us all. It's about trusting yourself, standing up for what's right, and never backing down no matter the odds. So what do you think? What lesson did you take away from Jessica's journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future stories that will inspire and move you. Thanks again for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next video.